This week, Keith and Mrs. M has slipped away for a few days, this time to Montana, once again leaving the doors to the FMM podcast studio wide open and the way clear for Terra and myself to stage another Team Takeover. If you missed the last time we jumped on the mics, we'll do a quick intro. I'm Rob Nicholson, the mild-mannered janitor at FMN, but better known in my role as the content creator and program support specialist.
And I'm Tara Merritt's, the FMM Connections Architect, and I just so happen to be in Montana as well, chilling in my parents' camper. So let's get down to business and grab the first clip we're going to talk about. So this clip was taken from podcast 77, Stealing Like an Artist or Like a Thief. So this is an interesting clip I have here. Let's take a listen.
So taking ideas and putting them in a melting pot, great word, right? Pun not intended, but that works really well here. Putting them into the pot and mixing up these new ingredients and coming up with something new is the name of the game. Everybody's done pretty much everything there is to do. It's about bringing our own unique and individual take to things.
So what I really liked about this clip is the idea of being influenced by different music as opposed to stealing directly from it. And also just the idea of the melting pot of genres and kind of throwing things together and making your own thing. So I personally always mess around with different genres. I like putting different things together to see what I come up with. Sometimes I'm directly trying to imitate an artist. As they say, imitation is the best form of flattery. So even though I try really hard to imitate artists, I always still end up coming up with something that sounds way left field and just like my own sound. I've always been a really huge fan of Machine Drum and Kaytranada, and their genres are so different. But somehow I have found I take elements of those sort of inspirations and kind of throw them together to make something totally new. I know one of Keith's biggest pieces of advice for people who are beginning production is to stick with a genre and get really good at that genre. Yep. And I tend to be rebellious in that sense. Like I cannot stick for the life of me. I cannot stick with one genre. And I would really love to try that. Like make an EP that's just drum and bass, make an EP that's just deep house or something like that. I think it would be a really good exercise. And one day I intend to really do that. But as of now, with the music I'm working on, I definitely like to create my melting pot of influences. And I think it's really powerful and really fun. Yet I still can't quite nail like a specific genre yet. But yeah, Rob, a question for you. So who would you say are some of your biggest influences in your music?
Yeah, I think you're definitely not alone there. I'm the same way. I mean, for me, it's more the complete genres that it influences. So it started out way back with house, and then it was acid house, techno, which then all kind of came together as rave. So the fact that I think I'm very much influenced by the old rave scene, which was a whole bunch of different genres anyway, that's kind of led to me just in the same situation, creating a lot of different things. And I mean, it's not just those influences, but I'm also I love looking into the history of music and the history of all these different dance genres. So those influences, the things that influence them, are also influencing me. The more I look into them, and even the other day, I'm finding stuff out. So one of my all-time favorite big kind of diva house tracks was "Love Can't Turn Around" by Jack Master Funk. And I just found out the other day that it wasn't the original. I mean, it was very heavily based on an Isaac Hayes track from 1975. So then, I'm looking back, checking out the Isaac Hayes stuff, and then that's going to, again, further influence what I make.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, all over the place. Same thing.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, that's a really good exercise. There was somebody, I can't remember who it was. It was one of the members who said, you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at what artists influenced my biggest influences and go back and back and back and back and just see what influenced them and so on and so on. Just to get an idea of like where the roots are of what you love. And I just thought that sounded like such a fun and interesting exercise. So yeah, super cool.
Yeah.
Especially learning the history of what influences you, I think is super important.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I mean, I pulled up a little snippet of the same podcast, which we will play now.
But innovating and reinventing, that's awesome. That's magical. And people say things like, oh, I can't, I better not use a loop from a pack. No, rubbish. That's totally fine. For a start, it's been made available for you, but it's one little piece. It's one ingredient. And to say you can't use things like that would be like saying, oh, whoever the individual was who invented the beef bourguignon, for example, having someone knock on the door and say, now, hang on a minute, I've cooked beef before. You're a thief. That would be insane. So taking ideas and putting them in a melting pot, great word, right? Pun not intended, but that works really well here. Putting them into the pot and mixing up these new ingredients and coming up with something new is the name of the game.
Okay, so that snippet was talking about bringing your own sense of play and your sense of fun to your music, and heavily on exploring and reinventing what you're getting influenced by. And it made me think, really, you can't not be influenced by hearing other music. It's going to have an effect on you. And I'd right to the point that even if you're just trying to create something totally random and unique, you use a random sound generator, random melody generator, what comes out of that, you're still going to be running it through your own influence filter and picking out the things that appeal to you, which are probably based on things you've heard. Yeah. So you've just got to, I think, use these influences as a jumping off point, and then taking it from there, adding your twist to it. So you may be trying to make something that's current, but also just adding some experimentation to it.
Absolutely.
So I have a question for you, which is, how do you approach the balance between the sort of contemporary expectation of music versus experimentation?
So the contemporary expectation versus experimentation, that's a great question. Yeah, it reminds me of a conversation I had with a good friend just recently who was saying, really what it comes down to is being authentic. It doesn't, and especially this day and age, I mean, there's just so many genres everywhere, so many influences, everything's already kind of been done, that at the end of the day, being authentic is what really matters the most. Like, so yeah, I definitely have a fear sometimes that I've lost my chance with the type of music that I make, and that I'm not in the right era, or that I'm not it's not modern or contemporary enough or whatever. But ultimately, from what I've seen in my short life, is that things get regurgitated over and over and over again. I mean, yeah. Drum and bass is now popular again, and for me, I started listening to it in the early 2000s, which I realized wasn't even the inception of drum and bass. So it was like, it has cycles. Disco revival is also something that I've been hearing a lot of, specifically coming out of 2020. And in that era, I feel like everybody was looking for a way to escape and feel good. And I just heard tons of disco revival and bossa nova, revamps and stuff like that. And that kind of stuff really influences me. And so I balance that expectation with authenticity. I think is just just trying not to judge myself or to think too deeply about oh, is this popular right now or not. It's hard because obviously you want people to listen, but yeah, really authenticity is the answer for me. Cool. There. Yeah, so that's one part of finding your sound is like what influences you and kind of like taking from things that already exist. But just delving a little deeper into the concept of finding your own sound and the process of doing that. There's another interesting snippet from episode 71, Finding Your Own Sound, that I pulled up that I think is interesting. So let's listen to that.
If you want your own sound, if you want to be a highly skilled producer, if you want to release on top labels, you gotta finish a lot of music. You've got to. It is no coincidence that our community, that the content, the system, everything I teach is under the umbrella Finish More Music. Pick that name for a very specific reason. It is the key that opens the door to absolutely everything else.
I really love about this is pretty much the entire theme of Finish More Music is make lots of music and finish what you start. I like how Keith says, quantity leads to quality. So just write lots of shit music and eventually you'll find the diamonds and the gold in there. And he says that finishing more music is the key that opens the door to everything else. So there it is, folks. I gave the secret away. Just finish more music. Like literally, that is, I think, as you listen to this podcast, you'll see that it really has to do, like, one of the common denominators of all prolific artists is that they write lots of music and they only share a certain portion of it with the world. So I wish I could have told my younger self this. I wish I could have said, just write lots and lots and lots of music. Just finish everything you start, whether or not it's good. I wish I had known that when I was younger, because I think people have the propensity to just like sit and work with one track just painstakingly, like almost obsessing over it to the point where they're denying themselves the chance to grow and to move forward. So I just say I've written tons of shit music, but not nearly enough shit music.
Yay for shit music.
Yay for shit music. It's kind of a joke in FMM. Everybody talks about like write garbage, people, like just write bad music, and that almost like frees up your mind to not judge yourself as much and to just really enjoy and trust the process of getting better at producing music. But yeah, so I'm just curious, because I love knowing this about any artist. What characteristics of your music, Rob, do you think are your signature?
Whoa, there's a question. I think when it comes down to it, it's the fun and the energy factor. Again, it's taking my influences from the early 90s. It's there was that whole kind of anything goes, anything's possible attitude. The bedroom producers of the time were just using cheap and cheerful gear. There was the new gear that was becoming more and more popular, samplers and so on. So that's what I tend to be using, and that's the music I'm mostly influenced by. So I think again, going back to the whole melting pot thing, I think the characteristics of my music tend to be more left field sounds. So I like to keep things unexpected. So it's in an arrangement right in the middle. It's going to go off at a funny tangent, and that's right back to those rave things where they'll just grab some crazy sound from who knows where and throw it in there, and there'll be like this extra little chorus or verse which has absolutely nothing to do with the rest of the track.
Great.
Just to throw things, throw a spanner in the works.
Yeah, very good. So your signature is doing the unexpected.
Yeah.
I love it.
Hopefully that comes through in it. So yeah, I found a part of that same podcast which where Keith was talking about forcing versus doing what you love, and being authentic, which we will play for you very briefly.
If you try to force originality, you try to force a sound, then it's not going to be authentic. It's not going to be exactly what you love. That's what authenticity is, what you love, right? And if it's not authentic, then of course it can't be your sound. And I think there's a kind of a double whammy in this as well, because forcing something, I mean, just listen to the word, the way that we're putting that, forcing something, it's not that pleasant, right? And creativity is about play and exploration. So it's forcing versus doing what you love.
So yeah, the things I took away from that, it really is this idea of taking a step back, not worrying too much about finding your sound, which I think is easier said than done, because you pick a genre hopefully that you're going to be making, and therefore you know what sort of sound you want, but you're also very aware of you want to do something original. So I think there's that thought that kind of comes to the front all the time, which is what is my sound? You know, how can I make that sound appear? But then just trusting the process of making tracks a lot, which will eventually, you know, uncover what your sound is. It will become apparent. I think just going with that and trusting it will happen. That's the big takeaway from that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So my question to you is, so you were talking earlier about telling your younger self about, you know, that one thing. Would that be, if you did have one thing to tell yourself, your younger self, would it be to just keep on making tracks? Would that be the main thing that you think would push your music faster and further ahead?
Yeah, I think a combination of things. I mean, the podcast that came out this week, I don't remember the number, 182 maybe?
183 was the last
183,
one.
yeah, about things that every producer should know, that like, what would you tell your younger self? So that's been like a really strong theme this week. And I think definitely finishing more tracks is 100% like at the top of that list. And also using reference tracks. Oh my goodness. I don't know how much time would have been saved just purely from doing that. Like, even though my technical knowledge was lacking quite a bit more than it is now, and I'm definitely no expert, there's always tons to learn. One of the things that I think would have helped greatly is just using a reference track and really, really listening, like critical listening to the track, which is one of the greatest things about the members event in FMM. The members event is, Rob, you already know, but I'm explaining this to our listeners, where our members get to share one or two tracks, and then that are like 70% done or whatever, that you get feedback on, like really high quality feedback. So it's kind of like a give and get sort of situation. And the biggest thing that I've learned from that experience is critical listening, like actually just sitting and listening really, really in depth to my own tracks and to other people's tracks. I've learned more from that and from then giving feedback than a lot of other processes in my life. And so I wish too that I had told my younger self to, I don't know, like ask trusted people for feedback, and to not take feedback so personally. That was really, I never wanted feedback. I was like always really sensitive. So definitely, yeah, just produce more music, use reference tracks because they help a lot. And then ask trusted people for feedback, get advice, and don't take it so personally, which I know is easier said than done. So that's what I would have told myself. So that kind of brings us to the other topic, which is the danger of playing it safe. This is episode 94, and it's all about comfort zone and what happens outside of your comfort zone. So let's take a listen.
Discovering your own sound requires being authentic and being prolific. And being authentic is doing what you love. It's being different. It's zigging when everyone else is zagging, right? And in order to do that, and in order to consistently do that, it means that we need to endure discomfort. Because when you think about it, bringing something new into the world is a challenge, because you are not following tried and tested patterns. You are not copying. You are having to do something new. And your brain, you're a creature of habit, right? We all are. Your brain wants to do the familiar. And so in trying to create something new, it brings up resistance. It brings up the feeling of discomfort. Hang on a minute. Let's play this safe. Let's do what we always did. Let's maybe even avoid writing music. Let's go and sit in front of Netflix. Because creativity by its very nature, right, it's the process of using new ideas and new actions to create an original production.
Yes. So my biggest takeaways from this podcast and from this snippet are, the idea of authenticity and just being authentic and going with what your soul wants you to do, to zig when everybody else is zagging, and to also endure discomfort, because discomfort is where most of the growth takes place. So like, we don't want to copy anybody, and it's really easy to do that, to be like, I want to sound like this artist or whatever, and our brain wants to do the familiar thing because it's just so much more comfortable that way. But I think getting out of your comfort zone, sharing your music with people, asking people for advice, seeking advice, getting feedback really is another key to success, because you will never be able to hear your music objectively. So it's scary asking for advice, but it's where most of the growth is going to happen, I feel like. So yeah. I think a lot of the points, like I've already mentioned this before, is like using reference tracks. Like I've always tried to sound like somebody else, but I just never can. And I always end up thinking outside the box, which I feel like is actually more like a blessing than a curse ultimately, although it took a long time to recognize that. But yeah, I think getting outside of your comfort zone is super key, because you will grow, and you will grow quickly. So my question for you, Rob, is name a time in your music career when you felt outside of your comfort zone, either creatively, socially, or any other facet of it.
Okay. The 30 tracks in 30 days challenge. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, that was designed purely to push comfort zones. And it did the trick. But the thing I noticed there, it was like every day after day, that comfort zone out of the door. But my world of possibilities just kind of grew in that whole time. It's like they talk about the science is like on the perimeter of knowledge and understanding, and I felt like that was my world of what I knew about and what I could do. Mm-hmm. It was like someone just inflated the balloon, and suddenly I've got so many more possibilities just from pushing those limits. So
that's
without
fantastic.
a doubt.
Yeah, I mean, hearing people's experience with that, it sounded crazy. Like I would definitely be uncomfortable doing that as well. And didn't you get a lot of those tracks signed as well? Like
there's certainly a couple signed. There are others which I'm finishing up so that they can then be released.
That's great.
But yeah, I mean, a lot of them were. I would say about 50% of the tracks I did in that time. I'm taking further and either finishing or getting signed or whatever.
That's great. Yeah. Very good.
So yeah, I picked a snippet too from the podcast, so we'll play that.
And if you keep abandoning your music, or you keep writing stuff that's not lighting you up because you're not, sitting with that feeling of discomfort and giving yourself a chance to come up with ideas, or you're only writing a tune every now and again and bottling out. And I know that sounds harsh, it's tough love, but bottling out of going in the studio and writing another one and another one, then you end up with not very many tunes or none at all, and it's not lighting you up. And that's when we start to stagnate, right? Or it becomes boring, or there's no satisfaction from it. And as you know, if that keeps happening in any walk of life, then your passion is naturally just going to die out for doing the thing. If we're never getting any results from it whatsoever, or the results we get are always things we don't want, there's a risk of the passion dying out, which is the ultimate missed opportunity.
Okay, so that little segment was talking about running, this idea of running with the first safe idea that doesn't necessarily light you up, and how that's our kind of safe comfort zone is just going with what's familiar, the safe idea, and yet you keep on doing that. Eventually, you're just going to lose that fire within you to create. And the quote that Keith gave there was, "Choose short-term comfort over long-term discomfort." Mm-hmm. And I found running with a weird idea or a sample that crops up in the process of generating ideas, even if it doesn't seem to fit any of the trends or maybe even where I was hoping to take a track, rather than just throw it away, I'm now pushing those tracks to the end just to see where they do end up, and looking back every time I've ever done that with a track and just taken that weird idea which previously would have been a throwaway, no, that's just like a weird bad idea. Mm-hmm. Those are the tracks that continue to excite me today. I listen back to them, I think, yeah, I'm so glad I went with that. It was uncomfortable to take that to a finished track because it didn't follow any of the set patterns I was used to, but I ended up with something that was different to everything else I'd made, which definitely does light me up.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's nice to kind of have those, throw the wrench into the whole thing and have those songs that and likely it's probably still sounds like you. It's just it's like something new, like, oh, new and unexpected, and people love that element of surprise.
That's it. And I think those it goes back to my what is my sound, and that's exactly the kind of thing which I think of when I try and pigeonhole my sound. It's got those unexpected bits and pieces in it. So question for you, what was the biggest risk that you took with your music, which you now look back on as a turning point?
Oh, that's a question. That is a question.
Or a particular track, any one thing.
Let me see. Well, just recently I played a track of mine out live that doesn't sound like anything else, but it's still without a doubt is my sound because I can't get away from it. And I don't mean to sound annoyed with that, but sometimes I am, because I'm like, oh, I want to experiment with something else, and I actually just sound still, people can still recognize that it's me, and I think the voice gives it away. But but I played a new track that is kind of drum and bass influenced, but it's at a slower tempo. It's at 155, so it's not drum and bass proper, but it has those elements in it. And I really wasn't sure how it was going to work, considering that the audience were familiar with kind of older stuff. And so it's always a risk for an artist to sort of play something new when they're kind of experimenting in a new realm, because you don't know how the audience is going to react. Right. And I'm by no means that prolific artist stage yet or anything like that, and I have a very small following, but for the people who do recognize the sound, which I'm extremely thankful for, playing a song that was kind of left field like that was kind of scary. And it happened that the people really responded to it. I had a lot of people ask if I was gonna release the song and when it was gonna come out. And so that was, in terms of finding your own sound and experimenting within that sound, and and taking risks like that really paid off for me personally, because it felt it did feel like a turning point. It felt like, okay, people are still with me here, and it just goes to show that you should never stop exploring and learning new things. And just growing your sound and yeah, I mean, like you don't have to stick to the rules all the time. In fact,
Absolutely.
it's advised that you don't.
Yeah, never stick to the rules.
Yeah.